Hi everyone, can you hear me again? Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes, okay, so we'll continue where we left off. I do apologise. I think we ran out of time. I don't know. Maybe someone joined early like the last webinar in October, but never mind. We are back. So, where were we? Yes. So I was just saying that it's important that the students know the rules of the game. So give them the criteria, have them mark each other, because when you're thinking like an examiner, it's easier to then perform the role of the student. And then self-marking. Students are self-aware enough to know what they do well and what they do badly, and when they have a list of the criteria in front of them, they can see the areas that they need to improve, hopefully. Okay, the second one. This is a game that I really enjoy playing with any class at any level, actually. So again, you should adapt this to the level that your students are performing at. It's called the Past and Future board game. So I gave my students three cards of one color. So the pink was cards that they had to write 3 dates in the past, and then 3 orange, they had to write 3 dates in the future. I think it was that way around anyway. Maybe I got it. No, the 3 orange was the 3 dates in the past, and the 3 pink was 3 dates in the future. That way around, but it doesn't really matter. So these dates are significant for them, and these are dates where something happened that they can talk about freely. And then in groups of 3, 4, or 5, depending on the number of your students, they stick them down on a piece of card, and then all you need is a simple die, and the first student rolls, they get a number 5. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They land here, the 18th of July. And the person who wrote this down must speak for a minute about what will happen or what happened, well, whether it's in the past or the future, something about this date. Okay, and the idea is that they're using as much grammar as possible in the future tenses, or if they land on the other color, in the past tenses. Okay, so you could have all the tenses on the board ready for them, and yeah, it's just a nice way to personalize the language. And all of these things, they must have something to say. They must be able to speak about them at length. So it's just getting the grammar in. You can invent rules like you have to use 2 different tenses during the speech. But it really is adaptable to many different levels. Or you could get them always to use a conditional, a third conditional if they're talking about the past, or a first conditional if they're talking about the future. So it really can be adapted in many different ways. A third activity, which my students have been enjoying recently, is to try to get them to use conditionals as much as possible. So sort of drilling the use of spoken conditionals. I think often the problem is that students know how to form the different conditional sentences, but there's a big difference between knowing something and then using it. So that's the gap that we need to bridge in the next 10 or 11 days before the exam. Because if they don't use it, they can't get the credit for it. The examiner is not a mind reader. They can only give marks for what is used. So it's important that the students realize this, that they need to show off in that short period of time as much language as possible. So this is just one example. This is with the third conditional, as you will know. So one student starts, they go around in a circle. You could split them up into small groups of 3, 4, or 5. If I'd done my homework, I could have gone to the cinema. And I always sort of stress the "uv" here with the pronunciation. Could have, or could have gone. I could have gone to the cinema. And then the student next to them continues this sentence. If I'd gone to the cinema, so you see the link, I would have seen Black Panther, and then the next student will continue that on. If I'd seen Black Panther, I would have left early. And then the next student says, if I'd left early, I would have, and then it goes round, and they can go round and round and round. Have a bit of fun with the language. They can get as creative as they like with that. It's just trying to get them to use these structures when they're speaking, because as we know, these things are learnt in theory on paper, but when it comes to the actual practice, it's easy to fall back on the simple tenses that students are used to, and that's partially why I think that the grammar mark is so low, because they just forget to use them. It's not natural for them to be using all of these tenses, especially in such a short period of time as the exam is. But we have to try to encourage them. We have to train them up to say, look, it's not real life. It's 10 to 12 minutes of speaking where you need to stuff in as many bits of grammar as you can and really show off everything that you can do. And the last speaking activity I'm going to talk about is called casino grammar. Nobody wins any money, unfortunately. But it's only called casino grammar because, again, it relies on the use of a die. So what I do is I write 6 different tenses, or 6 different verb, 6 different tenses or sentence structures, it doesn't really matter, on the board. So you can have a read through those 6 options. And then students start answering a question, any question from a past exam will do fine. You know, do you like sports? Or it could be anything from, part 1 of the exam where they have to answer the 5 questions about the topic. So they just start speaking. Oh yes, I quite like sports. I especially like football. And then their partner will roll the die while they're speaking. And number 2, and the student will look at the board and say, right, so keep speaking. And this weekend I'll be playing football with my friends because, and then they keep speaking. And I mean, the teacher can signal when the partner throws the die, or the partner can decide. Yada, 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 yada. Now we've got a number 4. And if it rains, we won't play outside, but we'll hire a. So it's just trying to get them to use the different grammar tenses in what can just be a very, very simple answer, and often is just a simple answer. Even my best students that are taking the exam, if I don't remind them all the time to use the grammar, they fall back on the simple tenses. I think it's natural. I think I would as well, because you don't need complex grammar always to express a simple idea. And in 10 minutes, it can pass very quickly without you using it, unless you're very focused on using complex grammar and getting it in there for the examiners, to make the examiner's life, or to make the examiner's job easier, and to allow them to give these higher marks. So it's just sort of conditioning the students to say, look, it's not real life. Here are the rules. Here's what we need to hear from you, and you just need to try to use what you know. Okay. A couple of things for the writing section. So again, if you remember back to the graphs from the Latte conference, the grammar criteria was the weakest of the criteria in the grammar, weakest of the marking criteria, get my words out. So what can we do about this? It's not a revolutionary idea, again, but give them the criteria. It shouldn't be a secret. How can students know what is expected of them if they don't know how they're being assessed? So we need them to realize that they have to consistently maintain a high degree of grammatical control of complex language. And then when they're doing practice writings, they should be underlining the different tenses, the different structures for grammar, and they could be doing this for their own work or marking their peers' work, marking each other's work. And I mean, rule number one is awareness. They need to see and recognize how much grammar they're using and how they could include more, which is the key. And then something that I've been working on recently with my two classes who are taking the Year 12 exam shortly is planning, because I was noticing that there were very few bits of ink in this box when we were when I was marking the practice questions that they were doing. This was often left empty, and I was getting a bit frustrated. And so we've been working on planning and a structure for the plan, and then spending sort of 5-minute periods of forget about the writing of the whole question. I just want you to write the plan, because with a good plan, it's often easier for the students to write a decent answer, and especially as is the focus of this webinar, to include more complex grammar, tenses and sentences. So the structure that I came up with looks something like this. So the points here on the left are the points that are detailed in the rubric. So these are the instructions, what they need to include. So this sort of accounts for the content, right? This accounts for the content, so make sure that they're answering all parts of the question. And then here, of course, we have our favorite section, the grammar section. So I say to them, look, I just want you to put in 2 or 3 different tenses, whether they be future tenses, past tenses, conditionals, some kind of inversion, something that's not, that you wouldn't always do and would count as complex grammar. So in this case, point 2, I can't remember what it was now, something about how long they've been working on the project. Point 2, you're right, I've been working on this project for 3 months, and then you look at point number 4 and you write something like, oh, if I hadn't done this, I would have done a 3rd conditional, and you write it in the plan. So then you just need to look at the plan and copy it down, copy the words, copy the grammar when you're writing, because once students start, I think it's very difficult for them to remember to include all this grammar. So if it's written down beforehand, then it's just a copying exercise. And this is about the paragraphing as well. So there's 3 paragraphs here. So point 1 and 2 were in the first paragraph, point 3 and 4 were in the second paragraph, and then point 3 was its own paragraph. So yes, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Not completely, but the planning in the grammar does really help. I've noticed over the last couple of weeks. Okay, so we'll move on to the last batch of revision activities. Excuse me. The last batch of revision activities, which will be to do with looking at the use of language, whole exam paper, which, as we saw in the criteria, was the weakest of all the exams overall, and most of it is grammar related. So a few suggestions. This is a nice sheet which I left the link is on one of the slides, so hopefully it will be on the Latte website later on, and you can just click on the link. But this is about prepositions, which are very problematic for many of my students, and it's something which really need a lot of attention in these last in this last stretch before the exam. And so, taking all these sentences, students write in the preposition. So none of us believe in. So this is the first stage. They write in the preposition. They believe in. Find it difficult to concentrate on. Would you forgive us for? Would forgive for. And then there is a discussion. They pick one of them and they try to come to an agreement on something that they all object to, for example. So it's combining the written grammar and also a little bit of speaking, a little bit of interaction. Hopefully they'll remember it a bit better if they're using it again and again in a speaking activity. So the first half of the sheet is about verbs, and the second half of the sheet is about adjectives and preposition collocations. Yes, it's not. I wouldn't spend hours and hours on this discussing every single one, but students just pick one or two and try to find some common ground, or they can freely disagree, but as long as they're using the language and repeating it out loud, hopefully it sticks a little bit more. And if they get one of these exercises in the use of language exam, then they can think back to when they were discussing about what they were getting fed up of at school. This is another task I found online recently. So yeah, there's a whole text, and at the end of each section there is an adjective or verb, and at the start of each section there is a preposition. And so my students in pairs, they tried to put the text in the correct order for it to make sense. And it's quite interesting, a little exercise actually, because there are a few different options for each. And when they weren't thinking of the meaning, they came up with some very odd sentences. They were just thinking of the preposition, which was the correct preposition, but then I think, you need to think of the context as well in these things. So this is, again, like the last activity was combining prepositions and a bit of speaking. I'd say this one's combining prepositions and a little bit of reading comprehension, making sure you understand the gist and the general meaning of the text to be able to do this correctly. So this is a sort of a 5 or 10 minute exercise. And then depending on what they find difficult, you can, of course, go over the problematic ones with them. Okay, use of language task 2, select a word for the gap. So I had some of my students make their own using a text. This one was about Roald Dahl book, Boy. And they blocked out certain words, and I said, well, you need to choose some verbs, some adjectives, some nouns, etc. And so it really gets them thinking of the type of words. And then they swapped with another group. And of course, the process is the important thing here. So for each gap, I made them say, what do you need in this space? So every now and then, a grey cardboard box was dished out to each of them. So I said, what do you need in space 1, for example? So every single group had a different one of these because they made their own. But just to take space 1, a grey cardboard box. What kind of word do you need in this space? Can anyone write in the chat box? Quick. None of you are there. It's an adjective. Yes, I've got it correct. So you need an adjective, and then of course that narrows down the number of words that are possible in that space. And then it's all about the context. A grey cardboard box. And so that's the process that I want them to go through in the exam. So that's the process that they practice with their partners. So again, if they're creating their own materials, it doesn't take very long, but it just gets them thinking of the process of the examiner. So why have they chosen this particular word? What is a verb? What is an adjective? Where do they go in the sentence? How do they relate to each other? Okay. I've just been told that our free meeting will end in 10 minutes, so we better get a move on. Thanks, Martin. I've got a few more. Don't go yet. So this is another game which I play. Again, the last 5-10 minutes of a class. So it's called categories. Many of you might have played it in the non-grammar form. So they copy out this table. They could be on their own. They could be in small groups. And I provide one word, and they must complete the rest of the row, or as much as is possible. So, for example, the word might be, you can all see that, happily. So I just write in the word happily, and then they get to work. Right, the adjective, the positive adjective, happy. Negative adjective, unhappy. Verb, to happy, no, to be, or to be happy. But verb will just cross out there. The noun, happiness. Ding! And then the winner will win a point for the team, and then we'll go to the next one. And the next one might be, another word. So it's looking at I mean, the two things that become very quickly clear in this is that the adverb is often just the adjective plus ly, and then the range of prefixes, negative prefixes. So it's very good revision exercises for this, and as I said, it's very useful for the task 3 word transformation, which again is about thinking about what type of word do I need? Is it positive or negative? And then I need to be able to transform the word given. So it's like a 2-step process. Another one for task 3. Yes, this is just purely on prefixes. So if you'd like to download it, you can click on that link later on the Latte website. But I won't spend too much time on this because the clock is ticking. And then another game that we can play. Yeah, I think a revision should be fun. I keep saying the word game. Of course, it's a very serious exam, but I think the students are stressed enough already that they don't need that extra pressure of if you can raise a smile in class in the week before the exam, then it can go a long way. So they can revise and not be super stressed at the same time. Yes, taboo. So describing a word, and then another student saying the form of the word that you need. For example, you feel this when you admire someone like a musician or politician. I need a noun, admiration. This describes a person who is feeling disappointment, disappointed. Opposite of appear, disappear, of course. Task 4, so this is very similar to the self-created material that we looked at before, but now you can have the students block out, for example, articles, prepositions, where there's only one option, and then swap with their partner, and they can work on it together. So they can work on it themselves and then give it back afterwards. And then one word shootout is a popular game. Again, it doesn't take too long. It can take as long as you like. But so 2 students come forward. So 2 teams or even 3 teams, depending on the size of your class. They represent their team, and I write a sentence on the board with only one option possible. For example, the exam result depends on you, and they just have to shout out the correct word which is missing. So this one, on, the, up, of, and so you can have a lot of fun with that, but there's also a lot of valuable revision happening for part 4 of the exam. Okay, so we've only got 5 minutes left. So I'll be very, very brief. I've actually written a whole blog post about this called 3 Ways to Beat Exam Anxiety. So if you're interested in a few more details, then please do have a look at that. But very briefly, this is the inverted U theory, and I think a lot of our students are past, by the time the exam comes around, the exam morning, they're past the point of optimal performance. They're so stressed that it's very difficult for them to achieve their best result and to use all the knowledge that's stored up there. Most of the time, in my experience, this isn't so much the problem that the students don't care. They're actually caring too much, being too stressed, being so aware of the importance of the exam that they can't really think. So what can we do? Well, one theory is power poses. This isn't a joke. Power poses actually slow down your heart rate and reduce the level of cortisol being released from your brain, which is the stress hormone. And so holding one of these for 2 minutes actually decreases the cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases the testosterone, which is the sort of the confidence power hormone in the body. So it's just a 2-minute exercise before the exam starts. So this is the CEO pose. So this is the Wonder Woman pose, obviously. And then here is the victory pose. So in just 2 minutes. And if you'd like to see, to learn more about this technique in particular, then Amy Cuddy's TED Talk is very, very interesting. She's one of the researchers who came up with this. And then another thing we need to try to do, or the student needs to try to do, is to decrease the heart rate. When we're stressed, our heart rate increases, and this shuts down the frontal lobe, which is responsible for decision making and logic, which is obviously quite useful during an exam. And so a couple of things we can do, or students can do, but we can let them know. Deep breathing. It's very hard to do when you're stressed, but to just count your breaths, hold, breathe in for 5 to 8 seconds, hold it for 3 to 5, and then exhale for 5 to 8. Will decrease your heart rate and hopefully get you back to a point where you can start thinking, which is great, as I said, during the exam. And then another option is splashing yourself with cold water. I mean, we might do it anyway, but it stimulates, it's actually scientifically based because it stimulates the dive reflex, which slows down our heart rate. So, just a short exercise to make students aware of this the week before an exam can be very useful, because they need to be able to produce what they know. We can do all the revision exercises that we want and give them all the feedback that we can, but if they can't reach that optimal performance or as close to it as possible during the exam, then all of this revision is for nothing. And it's a really sad thing when students work so hard and then sort of shut down during the exam, but it does happen. So just a few pointers for students and making them aware that all of the stress is physiological, and the solutions are physiological as well. So they can do something about it to get the best out of themselves, hopefully, or get themselves in the right state of mind on the exam day. We've just got a couple of minutes left. Just time for an advert break. You will have seen in a latte email, a couple of emails already, that we have a training day at school number 13. So I work at International House Riga Satva, and it's on the 16th of March. So we'd love to see as many of you there as possible. So all the details are here on this link. And if you have any questions, we'll try and take a couple of questions now, but the thing will shut down in 1 minute and 21 seconds. So please do email me. It's jegerton89@gmail.com. And my blog is there. So as I said, there's a blog about 3 ways to beat exam anxiety. There's a few more details about what I just rushed through there in 3 or 4 minutes. So are there any questions? We have 1 minute. So if the thing disappears, please do email me your question. So if you could write your question in the chat box. No, thank you very much, guys, for coming. As I said at the beginning, it's a beautiful sunny Sunday in the middle of the day. So it's it's great that you are so committed to your students, that you've given up a bit of your Sunday to be here. So I do really appreciate that. So yes, we're going to cut out any second. So as I said, if you do have any questions, then please do let me know, and we'll try to get the slides up on the Latte website with all the relevant links shortly. So thank you very much for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.